Let's discuss agents. Not just any agents, but real-time multimodal agents. Many agents being built today are single modal. They're text agents. And with text agents, latency it's much more forgiving. And users are okay with a spinner or a text shimmer to let them know something's going on. But with real-time agents, latency is key. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Real-time, it is built different. What is LiveKit? We'll discuss the Cascaded pipeline and then how Azure and LiveKit work together. So before we talk about LiveKit, let's discuss some challenges that you will face when building a real-time multimodal agentic experience. You see, models, they are the easy part now. Everything around it is the hard part. Voice is one modality, and voice is real-time. And so we have to take the user's voice from their microphone, wherever they are in the world, send that to the models, generate a reply, and send that back to the user's speakers, all within a few hundred milliseconds if we want to consider it real time, over networks that we don't control. And so we have to think about all of the things that add to latency. So network conditions, echo and noise cancellation. We need to detect when the user is finished talking, so turn detection. We also need to allow the user to interrupt, but we don't want them to interrupt for a cough or a sneeze, or if they're back channeling by saying, oh yeah, we don't want that to interrupt. So there are a lot of things to think about and a lot of things that go into creating an excellent real-time user experience. And all of this has to work not just for a single user, but hopefully our application is very popular and it needs to scale to hundreds, tens, or hundreds of thousands of users concurrently. And so again, these challenges, they are not the responsibility of the models, but they are the responsibility of the real-time media infrastructure, which many are not even thinking about. And so this is exactly what WebRTC was designed for, but building infrastructure around WebRTC is not trivial. And so this is where LiveKit comes in. LiveKit is an open source real-time media layer that your agent and your orchestration runs on. So not just voice, but also video and data built on WebRTC. And so then we have the agents SDK. You can choose between Python and TypeScript. And these two things allow you to bring your agent, the same agent, to any device. So phones, laptops, SIP and telephony, embedded devices, cars, wearables, robotics, and much more. And LiveKit is the transport layer that ChatGPT chose for their voice mode. Now here is the voice pipeline. So again, the user speech is where we start. And the first thing we need to do is VAD, voice activity detection. We need to detect when the user starts speaking because we don't want to process silence. That would cost us a lot of money. So when the user starts speaking, then we send that speech to our speech to text model, which then transcribes the speech into text, sends that text to the LLM. The LLM generates a reply, again in text, which sends that to the text to speech model, which then generates the voice that goes back to the user. So that's a very basic voice pipeline, or also called a cascaded pipeline. Here is a zoomed out view of this. So again, we have our user wherever they are in the world on whatever device, and they're connecting through WebRTC. WebRTC, every modern device already speaks it. It is an open browser standard. And so then that connects to the LiveKit server, which handles transport, jitter buffering, codecs, SIP, fan out, and it's self-hosted. Again, it's open source, so self-hosted, or you can use it on LiveKit Cloud and we host it for you. That is the transport layer. Next, we go up to the application layer or the orchestration layer. And this is where the agents SDK comes in. This is where your code lives. This is where you connect media to the model. And so this again is where the voice pipeline fits in. This is where you pick which models you want to use, where your tools, your MCP servers, your custom functions, your custom business logic, all of that sits here. So the box below Agents SDK is a zoom in of what is inside the Agents SDK. And so the key takeaway here is that WebRTC gets users to your agent reliably, and the Agents SDK gets your custom business logic to your users reliably. LiveKit is actually model agnostic. We don't have any models, but this is not an exhaustive list, but this is some of the more popular models that you can use through LiveKit. So again, you pick which STT, which LLM, which TTS models you want to use. You can mix and match these however you want. And it's very easy to swap them out. It's just one line of code to change out a model. Now, this is also where Azure fits in. So we can actually use Azure in all three of these places. You can use the Azure STT, you can use OpenAI through Azure for the LLM, and then the Azure TTS. Now, as you're building with LiveKit, this is actually, I think, in my opinion, the most important slide here. Please use our LiveKit MCP docs server or the skill to make sure that you are using the most up-to-date context. So we ship new features at LiveKit almost every week, and our docs are amazing. They're always up to date, but your agent doesn't know this. And so your coding agent needs the most complete context to build accurately with LiveKit. So I prefer the MCP server. It's amazing. Let's get into a demo. Let's see how we can build one of these out using Azure and go ahead and talk to it. So first thing in your terminal, let's do LK app create, and we're going to use a template, the agent starter Python template. And then we're going to install another template using the same thing, but the React starter template for our front end. Now in the agent template, you'll find the Agent.py file, and this is the entire single file where your agent logic sits. So first thing is we are importing some things from LiveKit agents and LiveKit plugins, namely the Azure plugin for LiveKit. A little bit below this, we have our assistant. So this is our agent. You can name this anything you'd like. But what we're setting up in here is our LLM initially. And so again, we're using Azure LLM, and these are some environment variables from my Azure deployment. So I'm going to be using an OpenAI model here from Azure. Then we have our instructions. Of course, you're a friendly and reliable voice assistant demoing at Microsoft Build. And I gave it some Microsoft Build information. We can collapse that, and we'll move down here to on enter. When the agent enters our session, we want to greet the user. So we're going to give it some instructions there. Greet the user and warmly welcome them to Microsoft Build, etc. And then we define our server is agent server. We're setting up our Celero VAD here. And then here is our session. So we're going to name our session, named it my agent, but this is so that the front end knows which agent to connect to. So the front end needs that same identifier. Now below this is where we're actually setting up our agent session. And so here's where we define our STT, our TTS, and other variables here. But again, we're using the Azure STT and the Azure TTS, and I'm defining the voice right here. When we start our session with the agent that we defined, and then we await the connection, and then we go ahead and run this file. So actually very, very simple to get this agent up and running. Next, we just need to define some environment variables. So you get 3 environment variables from LiveKit Cloud once you've signed up, of course, completely free. You'll also need some Azure environment variables here for your STT and TTS models, and then OpenAI API key, of course, as well from Azure. And then we just CD into agent. We're going to UV sync and then UV run the Agent.py download files, which is going to download our small Celero VAD voice activity detection model. And then we're going to CD into the front end, PMPM install that. And then we're going to UV run the agent in dev mode and PMPM dev on the front end. So I've customized my front end just a little bit, Microsoft Build theme here, and we're going to start talking.
Hi there, welcome to Microsoft Build. I can help with questions about Microsoft technologies like Azure, Windows, Microsoft 365, GitHub, or the latest AI work Microsoft is sharing here. What would you like to explore?
Awesome. Yeah, tell me what are the dates for Microsoft Build?
Microsoft Build 2026 takes place on June 2nd and June 3rd. It is a 2-day event in San Francisco at Fort Mason with an online experience as well. Are you planning to attend in person or join online?
That's today, and I'm already there. We'll see you. So that's it. Quick and easy. Integrate Azure. Give it a try today and let us know what you think.